One of the most important
Absolutely.
things I always remember is gratefulness.
Oh, absolutely. We are live. Well done.
I think we've got this. Charlotte, are we live? Can you see it if it's on the...
I can see it.
All right. So I'll just take a moment here. We'll just share a few of these links.
Yeah, sure.
Share that to my personal page. All right. So at the moment, we are joined here with Jamal. We are just going live at the moment. So I'm just taking just a few moments here just to share the link around. If you're watching and you're tuning in, please do share the link. Today, me and Joel, we're going to be discussing, there's a lot happening in the world at the moment. There's a lot happening in Australia. You know, nobody really knows what's going on anymore because everything just changes so quick. 2020 is just that year that's slapping everybody in the face. It's like a train that just keeps, like, it's run you over and it just keeps going.
I call it the plague year. I think that works best.
The year of the plague. Are we facing some form of judgment? Like, what's going on?
Well, some Christians might say it's because we approved gay marriage. Others because we approved abortion. Some just say that this is the year that God went on holiday. I don't know. Who knows, man?
Well, you know, I think the world, it's just an ever-changing place. And I think if there's one constant, it's that the world is chaos. And I think especially for us now, we've been living in, you know, such a comfortable time, such a time of prosperity, especially over here in the West. Obviously, other places have been experiencing their own bad times, but we've also just experienced like this unprecedented time of peace. Like we've just come out of the, you know, absolute atrocities of the 20th century. And we just found this nice period. But then it's like all of a sudden, like technology just starts moving quick and the world just boom overnight. And then you drop in something, a word that, I don't know, can the word actually still get you banned off live streaming? If I say COVID-19, is that actually allowable?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think it's a problem. I think that's fine.
And you drop that into the world, you drop that into the atmosphere, and literally overnight, the world changes. And as it's gone on, other places have been changing very rapidly. I'm currently based in Victoria, Australia right now. And I actually came across Joel because I saw an interview he did with a guy called Riccardo Bosi, and I would really recommend checking out that interview. And broadly, I've been aware as to, you know, things going on in the world, but I've always wondered, how is it happening in Australia? How does it apply to Australia? And I've been trying to find people that have been talking about that. And I saw that interview. I was like, yup, that's my guy. And I've seen you've been quite vocal. You've been very, very vocal recently. In terms of a lot going on, because the media is framing obviously one narrative, maybe some stats and figures might show other narratives. And, you know, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. You know, I'm not sure if we agree on absolutely everything. I feel like there's a lot of common ground between us. And I think it's going to make for a good discussion. But just to open it up, Joel, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do?
Yeah, so I guess you could probably describe me as a political activist and commentator. I'm 23 years old. My parents, I mean, the left like talking about identity politics. So I might as well say my dad immigrated here when he was 4, and my grandparents on my mum's side immigrated here, and they're both Lebanese and Syrian. And I went to a lovely school in Sydney, and I live in Sydney still. I love the area. And look, I just felt that these topics, I've been following them for a while. I used to be a progressive, actually, in the 2016 election that I followed in the US, and then I became a conservative, and I've been very outspoken throughout the whole time. And I've been an open book. Anyone can look at my Facebook posts.
Tell me a little bit about Progressive Joel.
Oh, Progressive Joel. So Progressive Joel was a paying member of the Young Turks. He was basically, once I left school in 2015, I was very heavily induced in school, and I really, I had this massive gap of time that was just freed up, and I had to work out what to do with it. And somehow on YouTube, I stumbled across the Young Turks, and naturally, it all sounded good. And you know, they had some good policies, like get money out of politics, and they were very fascinating to listen to and learn for about a year and a half.
Mm.
I felt absolutely devastated on election day when Trump won. I watched the full 8 or so hours live stream, and I didn't cry and scream in the street. I mean, I'm an Australian, but I did just remember that day very vividly, because the live stream went throughout the day for us, because it's the night time over there and it goes through the night for them. And yeah, and I felt devastated, and I still followed them till mid 2017, and then it stopped, and I saw a couple of videos. One was from Ben Shapiro debating Cenk Uygur, the head of the Young Turks,
Mm.
and another one was of Milo Yiannopoulos debating a young feminist at the university, and that was it. That was what you could probably say was the red pill. And I realized that, you know, sometimes what feels good doesn't necessarily do good, and
Mm.
you need to look into the facts a bit more, and that sort of really turned me to more of the conservative side, and I've been really outspoken pretty much ever since. But even before that, I mean, I was pretty outspoken on the Young Turk stuff as well, and you can see all my posts about that.
Mm. It's interesting you say that, because definitely our feelings can lead us to bad places. Our feelings can lead us to the wrong decisions. And I guess when you describe maybe like the left side of politics, there's a side of politics that's trying to make everybody feel good. And I don't think that always works.
Yeah,
You're never going to be able to satisfy everybody, but there's definitely things that they stand up for that are right. I guess probably one of the issues that I might take to the left now, just as a preface, I would consider myself left or right. I'd say I'm apolitical, as in I kind of just don't have really much trust in government. Maybe that makes
yeah,
me conspiratorial, but look, I think the problem is left and right keeps people so divided. There's actually a lot of common ground in the middle, but there's a lack of a conversation between the two sides. And we can definitely see that in our modern world. Free speech is under attack like nothing else. And it's like I was telling you before this, we don't have to wait for other legislators to legislate against free speech. The big tech companies are already doing that. They're already deciding what's correct speech, what's allowed, what isn't.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely. I wrote an article about that the other day. I think it's massive, what's going to be happening, and I'm thankful the Spectator ran my article on that and the Canberra Declaration. But it's a massive issue and shouldn't be understated. You're right to focus on it.
And look, not to get too deep too quickly, but I guess what's got to be the real slippery slope is moving on from the removal of freedom of speech is freedom of thought. We're definitely going to be at a time where I think we're going to start seeing some real thought police. Like 1984, I don't think it's going to be much of a fiction. There's definitely going to be technology that is talked about. This is not conspiracy. Like Elon Musk is saying, it's like 2030, we want brain chips. And at that point, if you can read your thoughts, which they have technology that can do that. I remember years ago seeing on the news, Facebook talking about technology where people could write a status or a comment from their thoughts. It's like, this isn't too sci-fi. This is real technology. It's like, at what point are we not going to be free to think?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I mean, I've been working in Sydney and Australia, really to secure our First Amendment. And Mark Latham is doing some really good stuff in New South Wales on securing the freedom of thought, really freedom of speech in New South Wales legislation. And he's actually got a bill which is on the floor very soon, and he's getting people to send him submissions right now for anyone that's in New South Wales.
Yeah. And so, look, probably, I think that might be a good time to get started. So what do you think is like one of the most pressing issues facing just Australia right now?
China. China is the biggest one. I think that our military capability is laughable at best. The capabilities we've got right now are really, really, we've got a lot of work to do if we want to be not only taken seriously, but defend such a massive treasure trove of resources that we've got here, and of course the people here as well. China, it poses not only a military threat with its radical expansion in the South China Sea, but it's also a economic threat. I mean, I work in property. I've seen the massive amounts of land that Chinese people, not necessarily the CCP, but a lot of Chinese people have been accumulating in Western Sydney, Greater Western Sydney, and really across Australia. I mean, I've been to Victoria. I know everything. I know all about the blue gums down there. Now, it must be stated, the Chinese Communist Party is different to the Chinese people. I've met a lot of Chinese people who really hate the Chinese Communist Party, and I see them as trying to escape the Chinese Communist Party and get their money out of China. However, a lot of them are not, and their interests are not in Australia's best interests, and I don't think they mean well. And the distinction must be made, especially among ethno-nationalists, which we all don't really have much patience for, do we?
And I see, and so you're coming at this from a perspective that like a war with China is coming, or is a real possibility.
Well, what does a war look like? We're all. A lot of people are thinking about. I know you know this. Then our next war won't probably look like guys with bayonets in opposite trenches facing each other. To an extent, maybe it's going to be more of a Cold War and an information war. I think that's more likely. I mean, I was reading an article today about what would happen if Facebook got shut down, and the billions of dollars that would the damage that would do. Not if it shut down, if it sort of went bankrupt or something, and it had to be completely liquidated. The damage that would do, the danger of all these people's private information being released. 2 billion people that use Facebook. It would be insane. And the information world, the world's an open book. You're an open book, and the information that could be levied against you is insane.
And I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. So like, when it comes to these big tech companies, we have so much information these days, so much information, right? It can really be hard to discern between what's true and what's false. And you would say to a degree, okay, there must be some harmful information, like false information that could spread like wildfire, that could damage us people, it could damage a society, what have you. I mean, in that sense, when you have a company like Facebook that's in control of so much information and data, like, do they have an obligation to censor some speech?
Well, obviously they should. They should censor violence if people are promulgating violence and saying very specifically you should go to this person's house and you should attack them and this and that. I mean, incitements of violence, there's no tolerance for that. But in terms of speech, I think generally it's a public square and it should be treated as such, and because there aren't many alternatives as it stands.
Yeah. And so I guess now one of the biggest things I think concerning speech is we have this big worldwide event, the COVID-19, and there is only one narrative. Everything else is wrong. It's false information. It's dangerous information. It has to be censored and taken off the internet. And I really want to know, what are your thoughts as to what's going on right now in this space?
COVID's geez, where to start, Zach? That's a big one. COVID's a very complex situation. It's very difficult to find, reliable information on this. So what you have to do is you have to really spread your wings and get multiple different perspectives on what's going on, and really have some really reliable people you can listen to. I've been following the COVID coverage from a number of different people, and the best person I've followed is Ben Shapiro. He's actually gotten it 100% correct, pretty much. He's where he doesn't err on the side of conspiracy theory, and he's very reasonable when it comes to caution. I mean, the use of masks is a good one. And I think this is for a number of different reasons, but he does actually have his parents living with him who are older. But he also has to balance that with having a family as well, kids and all of that. And look, I mean, it's a massive question, Zach. The COVID situation is it's very complex.
I guess if I had to then narrow it down, I guess, you're saying earlier we're in an information war. So like, because what we're really having here is the media framing one form of a narrative, and I think people are starting to see that the media are telling porkies. They're telling lies left, right, and center. They will change their story. My friend sent me just like a screenshot the other day of the BBC, and here's one just to give you an example here. And it's like Gandhi statue unveiled in Manchester, and it's like praising it as like this great thing, you know, multi-faith society, we're so diverse. And then like, but from the same article, from the BBC as well, students want statue of racist Gandhi rejected, both from the BBC. And it's like, you know, they have this thing where they tend to contradict their narrative.
Yeah, there's a bit of a battle going on in the different media outlets. I mean, we're seeing this particularly in the New York Times, where the editors have allowed their staffers to push them around and even push them out. I mean, we saw what was her name? We saw this lovely reporter get kicked out the other day, who wrote the article on the intellectual dark web a couple of years ago, and that was pretty much the death knell for the newspaper. There's definitely an attack from the progressives on these established institutions, and they're gonna, well, to put it frankly, really kill the brand of these. I mean, New York Times is known as the Grey Lady of liberty. That's going to be gone. That's pretty much gone now. I mean, they've never fallen as far. I can't think of any other news outlet that's fallen as far as they have.
And I guess one of the points that I'm really trying to get at here is that the media has framed such a narrative that what's happening now in Victoria is that we have our Premier, Daniel Andrews, who is enforcing some very, very draconian looking laws. And a lot of people would agree with them. A lot of people say, right, we've got the virus, we've got this serious situation, we need a lockdown to save lives. But then the side of the story that you're never really getting from the media is the cost and the damage and the effect of the lockdowns versus what we could potentially be saving. And so what are your thoughts just broadly as to what's going on in Victoria? You know, seeing that from where you are in New South Wales, being somebody who's a political activist, what do you think about what's going on down here?
It's very frustrating. I listen to a number of different people. Dr. Scott Atlas, he's now consulting the White House in America, recently appointed to help guide their response to the coronavirus. Now, he's been very good on this. I encourage everyone to look up Dr. Scott Atlas and his interview with the Hoover Institute, where he kills a lot of the coronavirus myths, which is very reputable. At the start of the COVID crisis, at the start of wave 2 in about June 5th, you can go back and you can see I wrote a post about, I called it 14 Rules for Life. So it plays off Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life title. Now, I wrote 14 Rules for Life in the event that a second wave happens, because this was sort of when things were open, June 5th. And basically none of the rules were adhered to. The government didn't listen to any of them. Not that I expected them to. I know I've got a few people that follow me from the government. But if I could come to the conclusion that these are the rules you shouldn't break, and they broke pretty much all of them, I don't know what we're paying them for. You have to ask, how derelict are you? And what are you basing this off? I'm no conspiracy theorist, and I told you, I introduced myself. I'm just a 23-year-old. Yet, from watching YouTube and reading a few studies, this is the conclusion I came to. Why is it that I've come to that? Yet people who get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in Dan Andrews' case, he got a $40,000 increase in his wage. Why is it that I could come to this conclusion, yet they're not?
Yeah.
Didn't make any sense to me.
So what were some of the failures from the Dan Andrews government that you've seen?
Well, these sort of measures they sort of started coming into effect maybe 3-4 weeks ago, correct me if I'm wrong, where we realized this is the second wave for Australia, and it's thanks to Dan Andrews and the hotel fiasco and some of the marches that were going on around Australia. Some of the issues with his response includes when he didn't protect the most vulnerable in society. I mean, the elderly people that weren't protected is insane. He did not
Mm.
give them any attention. He did not pay attention to what they needed. I described it as defending them like it's a fortress, the healthcare centers. Instead, what do we find out this week? We find out that nursing homes aren't able to send their sick patients back to
Mm.
hospitals. Instead, they have to stay in the nursing homes. That's the worst place for them to be.
Mm.
Because, I mean, if we look at places like America, at one point in the state of New York, 70% of their deaths were in nursing homes. And in the US at the moment, 45% of all their deaths are in nursing homes. So
Mm.
logic dictates you defend those places like it's,
Yeah.
it's your goal. It's a treasure trove.
And I know sort of what you're saying there, the old folks, they're being kept at the nursing homes. They're not being treated at hospitals. And I know I was talking to one of my old bosses, who's an older gentleman, when this is all happening, because I was calling him, checking up on him. And he told me one of his friends that was terminally ill was told by his GP right at the beginning, before anything had really kicked off in Australia, said to him, if you get sick with this coronavirus, they're not going to treat you. I'm just giving you the forewarning now, because he was listed as terminally ill. And I just remember when I heard that, I was like, wow, like we haven't even got one case sort of in Australia yet. And that was how it was then. And I've been following it since the time information first started leaking out of China in about January was when I sort of started following it. I had to kind of stop following it because it's one of those things that, you can easily get into a rabbit hole and trip yourself up. But I guess, like you're saying, we've failed our oldest generation. And when you look at a lot of the clusters of outbreaks in Victoria, they're in the nursing homes. And it's a shame. They were the most vulnerable. They are who we should be protecting the most.
Yeah, it's very sad. I've got someone living at home who is very vulnerable, and the thought of him being treated the way that they treat, their nursing homes is just insane. I can't imagine it. And it's very, look, I understand the argument where people say they're older, they lived a good life, we need to be, we have to, sort of be appreciative of younger people and how long they're going to live. Well, this is, in my books, I see it as unnecessary pain that we put them through. It's insane how inadequate this response has been. I think I said to you before we went live that, Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, I listened to her for a few hours these last couple of days, and her press conferences. Her measures to protect the nursing homes are far better than what, was done in Victoria. Dan Andrews should be ashamed of himself. At least she's learning how to do lockdowns better, protecting the vulnerable a lot more. Why can't you do it, Dan? I mean, you look up to her. There's dozens of photos with him and Jacinda. I don't get it.
And I want to get more on Jacinda soon, but I think one of the other things as well I saw about New Zealand stage 3 lockdowns, which made a lot of sense to me, and I couldn't really see why that wouldn't work in Victoria. I guess what they're saying is that a lot of the recent transmissions has been within homes. But one of the things I noticed when I was reading about New Zealand stage 3 lockdowns was that you're allowed to have like another like family home or cluster of people that you congregate with. So it's like you have like your own little bubble. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And when I think about it here in Melbourne, this is something that I just think so weird about our policy. And I want to get more into that soon. But one of the reasons you could break the restrictions is to go see an intimate partner, right? But like, say my parents don't live here in Victoria, but say if my parents lived in Victoria, you're telling me I would not be able to go and visit my parents during this time, but I would be able to go see somebody that I'm sleeping with. And I'm just like, come on. I mean, I get that you're wanting to restrict movement, and that's the way that they want to handle this COVID situation. But I mean, is really like the only immediate bubble we're allowed are the people we're shagging? Like, that's it? Not my family?
Well, I mean, in the case of the UK, they even tried to get between the people they were shagging. So, I mean, we might get there too, man. We might get there too. So, now look, it sucks. And in fact, being inside is the worst place you could possibly be. This thing dies in fresh air. It's a respiratory virus. You need fresh air. In fact, once the lockdowns really took, in the first wave of lockdowns in the US, there was a massive spike in cases because of the fact that they were locked down in homes, which is the worst place to be, especially with some air conditioning systems that a lot of places have in hotels and in motels and just apartments. I mean, this is the reason why the cruise ships were such vectors for the virus, because their air systems that flow through the ship are incredibly dangerous and massive vectors of the virus.
Yeah, and I have heard about that as well. I mean, one of the early studies I heard when COVID was first going around in China was one where it spread in a restaurant to all these people, and what they'd found was the particles was in the air conditioning ducts. But I guess I've kind of lost what I wanted to say there, which is a funny point. No, because I had a point that I was going to get onto there.
It's in New Zealand.
Bear with me.
The fact that you were in New Zealand and the family was locked inside.
No, but look, I guess maybe look, just in the interest of it, I might get on to my next point, which was some of the measures that we're implementing in Victoria. All right, I don't necessarily disagree with if there's a deadly virus that maybe we should restrict our movement. Maybe we should look down a little bit. I can see there is logic behind that. But what gets really concerning is when we have a curfew, there's police and military on the state, there's mandates. Like I can agree that wearing a mask can be a good thing to help stop the virus, although minimal. And I guess for other people, it's more about, feeling safe around other people. But for that to be mandatory, for us to have a curfew, for there to be police and military on the state, for there to be a state of disaster so police can literally do anything they want, this really concerns me. And I've tried to speak up a little bit, share various things of what's going on here. And what I'm getting told from people is, well, you just need to comply, stay out of trouble, you're going to be fine. It's like, well, hang on, you're not even here for one. Like, you're not living in this right now. And I'm not trying to complain about these circumstances too much, because I'm very grateful for everything about life. And I've still got a lot of good things going for me in a time where a lot of people are struggling. But I guess what I'm saying is I find it really concerning when governments can just restrain us so much so quickly. And what's your thoughts seeing some of these measures being implemented here from New South Wales?
I think it's insane. The fact that these measures are going through, I mean, it's unconstitutional. You can't restrict the people to this extent. In fact, in a couple of weeks, I'll have the New South Wales Solicitor General in for an interview, and I can't wait to ask him some of these questions, because some of this is just, never has a premier had this much power over people in terms of technology, and in terms of what they can do is insane. And this is, it's not right. I mean, we can't even protest. When the Black Lives Matter protest was shut down, everyone was cheering, and I was like, hang on, guys. Only a few weeks ago, we were trying to do anti-lockdown protests. Are they going to use the same thing on us? Yes. But people, and this goes back to the opening that you said, people are so, tribalism always wins. That's the thing.
And it's funny because it's, together we stand, divided we fall. Yeah. And we have a lot of division in the world. And I can see it from a lot of different angles. And, it's like the Bible tells us this. And what does Satan do? Divide and conquer. And I think a lot of that is what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of division. So one of the things I wanted to talk about with you was this video that was circling around Facebook and YouTube and social media of this girl in the Melbourne CBD being choked by a police officer. And I just found this disturbing. Now, you can see that obviously she's not completely complying with police at the beginning of the video, but we don't know what the initial interaction is. But what we do understand is she's being pulled over because she's not wearing a mask. We later find out in the video she had an exemption. It doesn't appear the police officer knew about the exemption beforehand. She might have been refusing to, give up her details to the police. But the point is, we're talking about something like a mask, a face covering. And we're also talking about something that warrants a $200 fine here in Victoria at the moment. And this police officer literally grabs her like by the throat, takes her to the ground, and then he stays on top of her with his hands still around her neck. Now, she might not be choking her fully, but his hands are like on her neck, on her throat. Like, you grab anybody like that, they're getting uncomfortable, they're getting discomfort. And it's just like, this is the level of police power that you get under a state of disaster, because that's part of the reason of declaring a state of emergency. And now in Victoria, state of disaster is you give the police more power. You also give yourself more power, because the executive just gave itself more legislative power when you go into these high states of emergency. But getting back to the point here, a lot of people were like, good on that police officer, don't take shit. This girl should have, known better. Oh, she's being a rat bag, she's being this. And it's like, well, hang on a second. Are we making it acceptable for police officers to grab people around the throat for $200 fines? Like, do you want that? Like, what if you got a parking fine in the Melbourne CBD, which is like $130, and a police officer says, nah, oi, fuck you, and just grabs you by the throat and wrestles you to the ground? Like,
oh, it's insane. What happened to defund the police? I said it to you before we came on. The very same people that are saying, yeah, that's okay, that's fine, he should have been rougher with her or this or that. The same people, I bet they were the people protesting the Black Lives Matter protest. I really do. The fact that these people think that it's fine for the police to have, to be defunded, and then that they also have to be the ones that have to enforce these draconian laws, the mask has slipped, guys. The mask has slipped. You have no principles.
Although I don't think defund the police is quite as big a movement over here. I could be wrong.
If you gave them a wish at the time, I think that's what it would have been. I mean, we were talking about 240 something deaths that we're saying in prison. Yeah. Police officers, they really had to make a stretch, and Jacinta Price completely debunked that. But no, people still, it's about how they feel. They want to be a part of America. Everyone wants to be like America. Put some black boxes on their Instagram page, which led to the defunding of 139 police precincts. That didn't help anyone.
I'm really curious as to how many people are fully aware of the Marxist agenda behind that, and not that that's a conspiracy. It's on their own website. I wonder how many people are actually aware of what they truly stand for, and if they knew everything that they stood for, that they literally list on their website, would you still defend it? Because they put themselves in this really nice spot where it's like, to be against them is racist. Like, they've made, like, they put themselves in a spot where they're almost untouchable. It's, I mean, it's genius. The cultural Marxists have been wanting something like this for ages.
I heard Jordan Peterson talk about stuff like this in the past, and you know what he likened it to? He likened it to terrorists who store their weapons and their bases within schools, within mosques, within, just places like hospitals, because if you attack them, then it's like, this country just attacked the hospital. This country just attacked a school, See, this is the same reason why I can't, they call you a racist if you attack Black Lives Matter. Because they ask you, do you think Black Lives Matter? And I'm like, of course I do. But Black Lives Matter doesn't just mean Black Lives Matter. They're calling for reparations. They're the same group that led to hundreds of black deaths in these communities. Hundreds, possibly thousands of deaths, actually. I mean, police officers is insane. Yeah.
And I mean, some of the places that funds them, I mean, it's interesting. it's interesting. I don't think I want to go too deep there, but I think going back to this, I'm sure you're very familiar with the idea of the Imago Dei.
No, actually, what's that?
The image of God.
Imago Dei.
I think that's the Latin for it. I might have gotten that wrong, but the Imago Dei, the image of God, because I really think that this is a concept that society needs, and I really think it's a concept that could save society, and that is that you are made in the image of God. So you are of intrinsic value, and everybody else around you is of that same intrinsic value. And if you were to truly believe in God and who he is, and to believe that you are made in his image to be like him, and you see the other people around you, how could you prejudice, hate, any of these things to that person? You would realize the equality within you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a Christian concept.
Yeah.
It's with that concept that we did a number of different things around the world when, the same things that people say the West is terrible for. We abolished slavery with that concept. William Wilberforce, who was the one that really pushed for the getting rid of slavery, William Wilberforce was using scripture to argue with other Christians that slavery is wrong. People forget these things, and this goes back to the opening of when I said I was a progressive, and I got out of it. It's because there's more to the story. This is why people become more conservative as they get older, because it's progressivism is really easy to get stuck on if you don't know anything about the world. You don't have much experience about the world. And that's why most people, I don't know if you've heard of Thomas Sowell. He's a very prominent economist in America, very prominent. He's written like 50 something books. He used to be a progressive once upon a time. And it's not unusual to have that, but you will eventually grow out of it. It's just the nature.
And it's very interesting because I guess, it's attractive because when in the progressive sort of movement, it's like, hey, the reason why your life is shit is because you're a victim, nothing else. So now radical political change, flip the script upside down, revolution, let's go. Like,
yeah.
if they had a mantra, it'd be something like that.
Yeah, and if conservatives had a mantra, it would be steady as she goes. Doesn't sound that attractive,
No.
Whereas like progressives, it's let's go do it, let's go get them, let's flip the table. It's very attractive to a young man that has nothing else to do, especially during COVID, lost his job. X, Y, and Z, and they don't know anything about history. Very easy to happen.
Everybody's like so afraid of the far right, but it's like, how afraid are you of the progressive left? Like, that's a good question. I think many people ask themselves that question because the left, they get you in with one thing, and then like, right, well, now you for that, you also have to be for this, and this, or you're racist, sexist, bigoted, whatever, what have you. They'll call you every name under the sun.
Yeah, the far right in Australia is not even well, the real question is, what is far right? Let's say ethno-nationalist. They've got a strong Nazi sort of tie, and the identity politics of the right. We can all put that in a box and say, okay, that's too far. You shouldn't go too far like that. You can probably count those people on there's probably less than 100 of them in New South Wales. They've got no real political power. But there's none of that for the left. When does the left go too far? No one's really given it that much thought, even though 100 million people have died from it in the last 100 years.
And I guess for those who don't know what you mean, you say 150 million deaths. Are you referring to Maoist China? You're referring to the Soviet Union?
Yeah, that's 100 million people. So that's Maoist China. We've got estimates, rock bottom estimates, like 20, 30 million, up to like 50 million in just China. And the same goes for the Soviet Union. It was anywhere from 20 to 50 million. We don't know because it's starvation and everything.
See, I don't know everything about the world, but what I think happens is these things occur when you take away the intrinsic value of life and instead you pedestalize this idea of the collective. And, it sounds like, being more individualistic about life maybe sounds more selfish on the outset, but I guess in reality, you make yourself better, you make your family better, you make your friends better, you build a business, you make your community better, you can make the world better. But when you're constantly, I guess, in a situation where the view is, no, we always need to make sacrifices for the collective, a lot of people are going to just, well, it doesn't matter. Like, just die. Like, we need to push for this greater thing. So you just die. That's okay. Your life means nothing. You're just a monkey floating on a piece of rock.
Yeah, it's a dangerous way of thinking. I mean, I think that opens the way to nihilism and people not believing in anything. And what's the point in living in that case?
But I guess going back to now, and I say I want to get back into Jacinda, we've just seen, of course, New Zealand has gone back into lockdown. And I think one of the things people don't realize in just being like, yeah, let the government do everything they need to and enforce all these draconian measures to fix everything, that's fine. You realize that the way the lockdown system is going to work is we're going to constantly be going in and out of lockdown. Like even now in Melbourne, we've gone in stage 4. How many businesses have closed their door for the last time, right? They're not like, we're going to get out of this. So many businesses won't be able to reopen. And then the ones that manage to just scrape through, what's going to happen for the next lockdown and the next one? And you know, people that don't think it's going to happen, you know, New Zealand just overnight, 100 days, no cases, boom, back on lockdown. I think we might only be a few weeks away from seeing in New South Wales maybe going on lockdown again. Who knows?
Well, it doesn't seem to be taking a hold in New South Wales as much as it did in Victoria, which is good. Yeah, the whole Victorian case was rather insane the way it blew up. I think we've had 1 million just today. We tipped over 1 million jobs lost officially. And I mean, this last week I've been to 2 bars in Sydney, one in the inner city, and one in Parramatta, which is the second CBD of Sydney. And they said if we go into lockdown again, it's over for the businesses. We're not coming back. We just can't do it. I mean, the things were bustling once we opened up in around about June, maybe May, but they can't do it again. They're going to cop it again. And, you know, it's self-induced. You know, the government, what they're doing is they're breaking your leg with this response to the coronavirus, and they're throwing you a lifeline by, you know, despite the fact that they caused the problem.
I guess my only fear is how much of this power, you know, by the time we come out on the other end of Corona, how much of this power are they really going to roll back? And what are some of the new things we're going to see? I think we're definitely moving into a surveillance state. You know, they're already showing on the mainstream news the new AI technology. I don't know if you've seen this, that tracks and makes sure people are social distancing. I mean, it's going to be a crazy world that we're going to be sort of walking ourselves into. And I think that's why there's an importance to be able to speak and to be able to have free speech and be able to have conversations like this so we can maybe address some topics going on, because I think a lot of society is not fully ready for the level of change that we could be about to go into. And I mean, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, big tech's a massive problem. I thought you wanted this to be a positive conversation.
We'll end on a positive note. Don't worry, but things have to get worse before they get better, guys. That's one of the fundamental truths about life. So do you want to...
What's that Batman line? The night is darkest before the dawn.
Yeah.
Now look, the draconian measures, I think a lot of them will be given up, but there are some long-standing ones which will not be. The ASIO laws that are pretty much being passed in Parliament are very, very scary. I mean, people like Riccardo, you would have heard him speak about it in my interview. He's warning that they could be taking your kids away from you if you haven't been vaccinated, which is a very scary thought. I mean, you lose your kids, that's game over. You know, you can't fight back. They've got, you know, hostages. Some might see that as hostages if they control your kids. The mass surveillance state is crazy, because as much as I battle with the conspiracy theorists, I keep them close. I do have a respect for the conspiracy theorists, because this is their year. They have been right on so many damn things, which has been saying. I've known Riccardo for a little over a year now, and I'd often have conversations with him like we're having now. And he, just to give you an example of a conspiracy where I thought it was absolute crap, but he ended up being 100% right on it. These Uyghur camps in China, he told me that the camps are there for organ harvesting. Not only organ harvesting, but they're like, this is one of the benefits of the camps for the Chinese, but also halal organ harvesting. Do you know what that means?
No.
So in Islam, because these are Muslim camps, Uyghurs are sort of a brand of Muslims. In these camps are full of Muslims. Now, there's this thing called halal and haram in Islam. Halal is food you can eat. Haram is food you can't eat. Now, when I say halal organ, what does that mean? That means that the organ that is given to someone from someone else is from another Muslim. So what I'm saying is that these organs in these camps are being given to other Muslims, probably outside China, for very exorbitant prices, because they're from other Muslims, they're halal. Now, he said this to me a year ago and I didn't believe it. And then early this year, we quickly realized, oh my gosh, they are organ harvesting, and we know who they're selling them to.
Wait, so when you
Yeah,
say organ harvesting, you're talking about like human organs? Like,
human organs. These are people in camps in China, anywhere from 1 to 2 million people in these camps being re-educated out of being Muslims. And I was just as shocked when I figured, oh, this guy's right. Um, and this is why I keep the conspiracy theorists close, because often they're right. And this is their year. It's an insane year. I mean, we've already seen what the Pentagon's been saying about UFOs.
yeah,
they're
nobody
slowly
cares about
telling.
the UFOs. So I got a bit of shock still. You've just absolutely red pilled me as to
Oh
what's
yeah,
going on in China. I was a bit
you're
unaware
kidding.
of this
Which
scenario. So I'm a
part?
little bit like, ooh. Well, the part where you said they're murdering people for their organs.
Well, they're not murdering them; they're just taking them. And if someone gets murdered, if they refuse to convert to worship Maoist China or President Xi, then that's it for them. They'll take their organs. I mean, we already know just if you look up tons of hair coming out of China, you will see articles come out. I mean, if you search up Majid Nawaz, he's a Muslim in the UK. He speaks on LBC radio. He has his own show. He's been speaking about the Uyghur camps massively. He even went on a hunger strike in last month to raise 100,000 signatures to get a conversation going in Parliament in the UK, which he did. He actually was very successful in that. And the Uyghurs are, I think they were selling tons of their hair over to the US, which is insane. And then people realize, hang on a sec, this is real. This is synthetic. Where is it coming from? And then we realize it's coming from these camps. I laugh because if I didn't laugh, I'd cry. What's happening in these camps is
That's
absolutely
devastating.
insane. Yeah. Sorry to kill the podcast,
No,
but look,
no.
in order to get over these things, we've got to put the facts out there and not sugarcoat them. This is what's happening, and worse.
And I think that's a fundamental thing about life. Like, Jordan Peterson used to say, life is suffering, so that's something you have to accept. It's not like that's his original quote, but I think one of the other things to come to terms with that I think a lot of people are very unaware of is, life is also very evil. Like, there is straight up legitimate evil in the world. It's a fact. People want to turn a blind eye to it. Some people are broadly aware of some evils. Some evils are done more under the rug. And look, not to get too conspiratorial or anything like that, but as for me being a Christian, like when I kind of see what's going on in the world, like I'm like, oh yeah, we're living in a time like very well described sort of in the Bible. And if you want to take a biblical worldview, it kind of gives you this framework of saying, hey, yeah, there is evil in the world. It's giving you that perspective to get ready to deal with it. And it's like, so now God's here, he's by your side, and he's going to deliver us out of that. But then, of course, on the flip side of that, the world's going through this thing. And I think the interesting thing about what's going on in the world, the way the media is getting caught out in its own lies and people are starting to wake up to that, is that evil ultimately eats its own tail. And I guess when people say, well, why does something like the end of the world as described in the Bible have to happen, like Armageddon, the whole world's destroyed, and then a new heaven and a new earth is made? And I think people say, why does that need to happen? And I think part of the reason is God is just letting evil run its course. And in a way, we're living through that right now.
Yeah, you might be right. I don't think we're in the end times, I'll be honest with you. I think we're in the season, but I don't think we are spiritual. I mean, Christian, if we're talking in terms of Christianity, I don't think we're technically there yet. I think things can get much, much, much worse. 2020 is just a year where we've tasted a little bit of a decrease in GDP and a few deaths. About not even the same amount of deaths as we got from the flu in 2017. So I'm not that worried about that. I am worried about our loss of purpose, our loss of who we are, as you alluded to. I mean, Christianity, as you said, it gives us a frame of understanding to understand the world, that it is suffering, and and look, this is why things have gotten so bad. It's the fact that good men have allowed evil to triumph. All that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And last week I interviewed Dr. Con Kafataris, who's been spearheading the the religious freedom stuff in New South Wales and also on a federal level. And I think we pulled this graph up 3 times during the interview. The churches have been failing us. The leaders of our churches are, how do I say this? They have no testicular fortitude. They don't. They just don't. And this is why things have gotten so bad. And this is why so many people have been leaving the churches. And you know, it hasn't just been happening in the churches. It's been happening in the mosques. It's been happening in the synagogues. There's no moral center. And people have been, allowing their leaders to lead them into these terrible sort of situations. And I think there's a big awakening going where people are realizing I have to do it myself. And that's why there's this rise of so many podcasts, you might even say.
Yeah, because I suppose some of us out here, we want to speak more as to what we see. And, you know, when you're saying there's a big failure in the church, I think the biggest failure in the church is that they stop preaching the gospel.
Yeah.
I think a lot of churches don't preach like the true gospel. And that's the core fundamental message of Christianity. Without that, it doesn't work. And a lot of churches these days, they trick people into this idea that God's this wish fulfiller, and you go to church and you pray and God makes all your wishes come true, and you don't sin and he lets you into heaven. And it's like, in this distortion of the gospel, we've created a version of Christianity that, you know, it still has some of the principles there, because I think God's laws work. And when you follow God's laws, naturally rewards follow you. But it doesn't have the core fundamental message there. And without that, it loses its framework, it loses its foundation, and you begin to see a failure in the church. And then I think as well, because of that, you know, if you're going to say the Christian church is the church of the true and living God, in a failure of the church, you ultimately then will see a failure in the state.
Yeah, well, I mean, the church is a cultural institution. It shapes people's, it really helps with mental health. I mean, before we had all these charities and all these government handouts and, schemes to help people with their mental health, we had the churches. The churches were giving way more money to people back in the day, and they were doing a lot that individual donations were way better way of doing things rather than government handouts. It was more direct. You could hold the people accountable. I mean, the Jewish community do this very well for each other. I've heard Ben Shapiro talk on this, and he said, if someone in our community needs help, then, you know, someone will mention it to the leader of the synagogue, and they'll say it in the service, and people will give money, and that man will eventually have to pay it back. And there's that obligation, you know, that they'll feel obligated to pick themselves up. They'll be very grateful. They'll be held accountable, and they'll pay it back. And that's a really good approach of doing it, because it's community based and it's more direct. When you throw your money into a pool, you don't even get the gratification of helping someone. You know, in Christianity, we're told that we shouldn't let your left hand know what your right does. You shouldn't go telling people what you've done. But in terms of fueling a social fabric, we've completely demolished that aspect of our giving, that nature, because there is a gratifying feeling that you get when you give.
Well, giving does feel really good, and you know, it says that, you know, blessed are those. Like, actually, I can't think of the verse, but you know, it's better to give than to receive. Was also the context of that verse, and I think that's actually quite intrinsic of our nature, because I think our God actually is a very giving God, and that if you develop a relationship with him, then, you know, he will sort of bless your life and sort of keep you in abundance. Now, to what degree, you're not promised like a perfect life, but I think that's brought over into our nature too. When we give to other people and we give freely for no other reason other than just you want to do something nice for somebody, or, you know, you want to help somebody in need, it is a really gratifying process. But you are right. And it's very easy to, you know, said, don't let the left hand know what the right hand's doing. It's very easy to want to gloat about it and get clout, and you're like, yeah, you know, I did all these great things for all these people. And I think then,
absolutely.
You know, what my man Jesus says when he's, you know, people will come to me and they'll say, you know, let me in, you know, I did all these great things in your name, and you say, depart from me, for you never knew me. And I take that to meaning as in, like, they did the good works, but they didn't actually have the change of heart.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, works are good, faith is good, but you need both of them, and you need to have a relationship with Jesus. I mean, he's not he's not a tooth fairy, and he's not. He's a very relatable guy. When I pray every night. I read my Bible every night. When I pray, I'm speaking to God, and God's my mate. Like, he's my
Yeah.
father, but he's also my mate. I mean, as you grow up and you have a relationship with your own father, it does reach a point where it becomes more of a mate, if it's going to be a healthy relationship for the rest of your life,
Mm.
where you both have the respect for each other, but also you have that mutual respect for each other, but you can speak to each other frankly. And I swear sometimes when I pray, there's no decorum. He's like a mate to me. That's what he
Yeah.
wants. He wants you to be transparent. And when I read the Bible, I'm listening to him. So when I pray to him,
Mm.
that sends the message. When I read his Bible, I receive the answer. And
Yes.
now, look, I'm not saying he speaks to me in a booming voice. I'm
Mm.
saying that his answers are in the Bible. And you know what? You said it before. You alluded to the prosperity gospel,
Mm.
where if you follow the gospel, good things will come your way. Now, I don't 100% subscribe to that. Sometimes things get worse, uh,
Yeah.
just like what happened with the disciples in the early days of the church. But what I do believe is the Bible was written based on fundamental truths in nature. I
Mm.
believe the world was written with fundamental truths into it. For example, a man must be with a woman. For example, that you should walk truthfully. You should, Jordan Peterson touches on a lot of these rules, and he articulates these rules of nature in his book, 12 Rules for Life.
Mm.
Now, the reason why people might, be successful because of by they follow the gospel, or they follow these rules, and they walk in a very upright sort of way, is because these rules are written into nature, and the Bible is just those on the paper. So when, for example, I say to, let's say I've had a fight with someone, and I have a pray with God, and I say, God, I'm really upset. I had this fight with someone. Can you please help me to do the right thing and move forward with this? And I might read the Bible, and I might read the verse, do not let the sun go down on your anger.
Mm.
I might be like, oh crap, maybe I should send an apologetic verse to this person so I can sleep well. And also, but obviously be genuine, of course.
Mm.
And put it behind you. See, there's nothing that's another thing. A rule for everyone in life. Don't hold a grudge. It takes too much effort. If you burn a bridge, you'll never know when you need to come back to that bridge again.
Mm.
Sometimes it might be your last bridge that you need.
Yeah.
You know?
You never know. You never know. I recall getting a reference from somebody who I actually almost wanted to cuss out, but I
Mm.
bit my tongue, swallowed my pride. I was a bit younger and hot-headed at that point in my time, but that ended up being a very valuable connection. But I want to go back to what you said. I love what you said. You're like, God is my mate, because I have fun when I pray. I feel like sometimes when I'm praying, it's not like you said, it's not like this audible voice speaking back at you, but there's something just so clear about praying. Like, you say how you're feeling, you tell God how you're feeling, and you just get the sense like, yeah, he knows, and he's there, and he's like, yeah, everything is good, everything is cool. But I want to ask you this, because you said you grew up with a Christian background, but when did you actually start your relationship with Jesus? Because you mentioned,
It's
sorry,
hard to
I
pinpoint.
realized I didn't finish leading there, but yeah, no, when did you
That's
start
all
your
right. I
relationship
know.
with Jesus?
I got the gist. Um, it's hard to pinpoint. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I've always been, my Christian family. We've always had they're very strongly Christian. And we've always had the conversations in the home. I mean, ever since I was in like year 5 or year 6, I remember sitting down on bean bags, having conversations with my parents, and we'd read a few chapters of the Bible a night. The reason we did it was not only to learn the Bible, because me and my brother were terrible at reading.
Mm.
So that was, and it really helped us. But look, it's really hard. It's really hard to say. But in terms of when did things really start to ramp up, I'd say it was then, maybe when I was about year 5, year 6.
Mm.
Um, by the time I was in year 8, I was going to Bible studies at night with Dad, and we wouldn't be doing the easy stuff, the gospel stuff. I'd been doing that my whole life in junior school.
Mm.
The stories of Jesus and the different teachings he did. But no, I did. We were doing Revelations, and we were doing, a bunch of different, difficult sort of topics. The Old Testament, which a lot of people try to stay away from. And no, I've been at it for a little while now. And I mean, I guess the peak of that was in 2017 when I was literally leading about 3 Bible studies and also being a member of 2 others, which was a massive year. But look, I also work at the Sydney Institute for Christian Studies and do lectures with them, which has been really great in the past few years. It's been a bit more quiet now, a bit more politics now, but no, this stuff stays with you. I mean, you don't lose these lessons.
Yeah. And for yourself, did you have a time when you questioned your faith?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a rock, but you wouldn't call it faith if you didn't question it, right? There's an element of sometimes you see things and you're like, maybe I am wrong on this, and then you're sort of humbled by it, and you sort of go back, you try to work it out, but then it always comes back to this: I'm a better person because of my relationship with this invisible thing. How does that make any sense? There's something there, and I think most people know it. I mean, the world is a blip in the universe. There's nothing else like it. I mean, God's made this massive playground for us, this universe, to keep us entertained. And there's so much subject material to keep us entertained. And we really do feel like we're at the center of the universe, yet we also feel so insignificant compared to the vast expansion of the universe and other universes too. I mean, we're also finding out that there's multiple dimensions, which is insane.
Yeah.
yeah.
No, there's a lot of insane things about this universe, and like people will say like, well, what do you think like what heaven is? Like, what you think you believe in this thing, you get rewarded in your life. What's heaven? I kind of have this idea, and it's kind of painted in the Bible that where those who are saved are coming back to rule with Jesus, not just on this earth, but on the new heaven and the new earth. And I think that reads out to me like, our eternity potentially is going to be spent exploring this wonderful universe.
Yeah, you might be right. I don't know. Whatever it is, I'm looking forward to it. There's no more crying and there's no more death. That's not a bad deal.
No more progressive leftists.
Yeah.
No, sorry. That's a horrible comment. I hope that
I hope
any
that
progressive
they join our
leftists are not
ranks.
saved. Yes. No. We want everybody to join.
We have enemies, but we love our enemies.
No, that's a very powerful thing. The Bible tells you to pray for your enemy. And to really be a Christian that believes in the Bible, to understand the power of life and death being in your tongue, to have people that are your enemies or you think are your enemies and to pray for them. I think that's a very, very powerful idea. And the Bible even tells us our enemy isn't flesh and blood. It's with the powers and principalities in the air. And, I was kind of saying before, maybe sort of we're in the end times. I don't think we're fully in the end times. I think maybe we're at a time where there could be a lot of change. It could set up something like what's described in the Bible there. But I guess one of the things that we might fall victim to on earth, which I kind of believe to be true, is that there is war going on in the heavens. And as the spiritual warfare plays out in the physical realm, and I think sometimes when there is bad things happening on earth, part of that is a manifestation of the spiritual warfare when there is evils in certain areas, like what you were explaining about those camps in China, that there's something spiritual about that. There's like something like evil spiritual wise that's like allowing that to happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that there's a bunch of different things that are going around the world, and there is a spiritual nature to it. I mean, as you said, your struggle is not against flesh, it's against principalities and of the dark realm, and these are things that you will not be overcome by them. That you will overcome them because you have the greatest power of all, and that's through Jesus and Him overcoming death, and that's the most powerful weapon you can have. That in the Bible, the Word being your sword, and that's why it's so important we secure it in religious freedom, for example.
Yeah,
our ability to quote the Bible.
Yeah, And that's something I really need to read my Bible more, because I would like to have more quotability to it. But every time I read it, I'm like amazed. Like I'll read like 2 verses. I'm just like, I'm like, oh, wow. Like incredible. But
do you read your say your Lord's Prayer very often?
I don't say it often enough. Like I go through phases. Like I'm one of those Christians that get stuck in phases. Like I'll have times where like I'm praying all the time. I'll have times where I'm not. And I definitely know the difference in my life when I'm praying and when I'm not. But I almost always get the sense that like God's always out there looking after me. I never feel like he's not, which is something incredible, and it's something quite indescribable. And I guess the hardest thing about being a Christian, trying to explain to somebody that doesn't believe, is like the experience of God and the way that when you know it's him. And it's not, like I said, it's not like an audible voice, but just the way things play out, the way there's just confirmation coming from all different sides, you know, the way you just read the Bible exactly what you needed at that right time.
Yeah, man. I'd strongly recommend you read at least the chapter. And I mean, if you're wondering where the hell do I start, just start from the gospel, man. Start from the gospel. If you get to hit the genealogy where it starts saying all these names, just skip that. You can come back to that later, but just start reading a chapter. And I'll tell you why I mentioned the Lord's Prayer, because in the Lord's Prayer, it says, you know, our Father, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. What the hell does that mean? Our daily bread is the word of God. So if you're not taking your daily bread, then what do you expect's going to happen? I found there's almost a correlation between when I've been consistently reading my Bible and praying to God before I sleep, and not only getting a good sleep, but also just things. I can't explain it. Things tend to pan out how I really want them to because you know there's these verses in the Bible which say, lay your plans out to God and you'll see them eventuate. You know, even though it might not be exactly how you wanted them to be, often it ends up being better. Just give it a try. You've got nothing to lose. If there's anyone that's listening.
I'm forever fascinated by the Lord's Prayer. No, because it is a really fascinating one. Like, give us this day our daily bread. So you said the word of God, and I now thinking about that now, I agree with you. I kind of translated that to my mind as like, give me what I need. But this idea of your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And I think, you know, the Bible says, I think Jesus says, might be in John, I could be very wrong, but it's like, ask for anything in the name of the Father, and if it is his will, then it will be done. And I think where a lot of people might get caught up is where they're praying for something that never happens because it never pans out the way it was supposed to.
In the name of the Son. I've got to correct you on that. It's the name of the Son.
Name of the Son. Okay.
And you pray to the Father, and it's in the name of the Son. Why is that such an important distinction? Well, God is a triune God as we know him. Being a Trinity, there's 3 parts to him: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Father is the guy up there. The Son is your ticket to talk to the guy, and the Holy Spirit is the thing that gets it done. That's why there's an important distinction. If I found that if you really, I mean, it's hard, look, it's hard, obviously this stuff is hard to track. It's not exactly scientific. This is faith we're talking about here. But if I found that it's very important when you're praying to God, the Father, to say, Heavenly Father, I need help with this. In the name of Jesus Christ, can you please help me with this? That's important. And it shouldn't be understated. But look up the verse tonight, because I know you'll read your chapter tonight, won't you?
Yeah. Do you know the reference for it? I feel like it's in the book of John, because there's a similar statement throughout the different gospels. Because like I have read the New Testament front to back, but obviously I haven't read it front to back enough to be quite as versed in it as well I'd like to be.
I think you should definitely look it up and work it out. But no, look, absolutely check it for sure. I mean, this is important stuff we're talking about, isn't it?
I think it is, because ultimately I think that's what's going to lead us out from this. And I think, you know, in the way I said that this is spiritual warfare, you know, with how crazy everything's been in 2020, right? You might say, okay, so that's an attack from the enemy. But I think that what could be on the next roll is, you know, if there's a move of the enemy, there's going to be a move of God. And I think we might be about to see a real big movement of God. I definitely know, be paying attention to YouTube, I've been getting into a lot more Christian YouTubers lately, and just seeing some of their channels blow up. And I'm like, oh yeah, God's ready to have a show. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, YouTube's such a valuable resource. And I mean, coming back to what you said before, that verse, I actually did find it.
oh yeah.
It's John 14:13-14.
Mm-hmm.
And I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified. You may ask me for anything in my name, and I will do it. So that was Jesus that said that, basically saying, you know, whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may give it to you, basically. Yeah. So that's the sequence of praying.
Yeah. But look, I think that was sort of nice, because I think we kind of ended there on a positive note. But look, what I might get you to do, because I feel like you know your Bible a bit better than me. And look, I didn't mean for this to maybe just be necessarily an overly religious talk, but look, just for anybody listening, what is the gospel? Like, if somebody wanted to start their relationship with Christ now, what would you say?
The gospel is the answer to everything, really. I mean, it's the gospel is the first four books of the New Testament. The New Testament is what Christians pretty much read. The Old Testament is what the Jews read. Now, the first four books, the gospel, is the story of Jesus when he was on earth and what he got up to. And there's four books: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Some of them cover similar sort of grounds, and a lot of them have similar sort of stories, like Jesus feeding the 5,000 or the 4,000. That comes up a couple times. And so there is some repeating, but what it shows is that there's sort of credibility, because they cover it from different angles. They're named after some of the disciples that were with Jesus. And so the gospel sort of gives you an insight into the most important part of the whole Bible, the Old and New Testament, which is when Jesus killed himself on a cross. He gave himself up for the good of the people, and he did it for everyone. He did it for the sinners. He did it for those that hate him, but he loves all of them. And once he did that, he paid the debt for your sins, so that you may, if you accept it in your heart, and that's between you and God, and that you guys can know that, you may be allowed into heaven. And look, that's the struggle of life. The struggle of life is living, because if someone dies for you, think about this practically. If your brother died for you, and he lived a certain standard in his life, and he gave up, let's say, who knows, let's say he jumped in front of a car and pushed you out of the way or something, he died. Don't you think you owe it to him to live a certain standard? Because all of a sudden you're living for both of you. You're living for the life that was lost. So you can't waste your life. That is similarly what's happened with Jesus, except he's actually got the power to forgive sins, because he's the Son of God. He was innocent when he was put on the cross. He did nothing wrong except speak the truth. And because he's the blemishless lamb, the lamb that is clean, the white lamb, he was able to do that sacrifice. And that sacrifice, it makes a lot more sense. It made a lot more sense to the Jews back then, because that's how they used to absolve their sins. It was by sacrificing a lamb or a ram or a goat. That's how they did these things, different calves. And they used to sacrifice the blood every year, or the high priest would sacrifice it on the Ark of the Covenant in the high temple. But their temple's been destroyed for a very long time, and they didn't recognize that Jesus is actually the Messiah, who was prophesied throughout the whole Old Testament of the Jewish book. They were prophesied that he'd come, and he came, and he fulfilled all of their prophecies, things like him walking in on a donkey on Palm Sunday. And they were blinded. They never realized that he was actually the one they were waiting for. So they'll still be waiting for this guy, but he already came 2,000 years ago.
And it's interesting to say that they were blinded, because I suppose the hardest thing to stand for is the truth, because everybody's blinded by it, even when it's right there in front of them.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a great verse in the Bible, comes up a couple of times, where he's basically talking about the Jews. And they say, because when the Jews gave Jesus up, Pontius Pilate, the Roman that was in charge, he said, this guy's done nothing wrong. I don't see why we should be executing him. What did the Jewish crowds say? They said, we give us Barabbas, kill Jesus, let his death be upon us and our children. Now, I see that as a generational curse. So now what we see is we see a situation where the Jewish people, they're ever made blind by the fact that they just can't recognize that Jesus was actually the one they're waiting for. And the thing is, there's some great verses in the New Testament which say that it alludes to the Jews. They will be ever seeing but never perceiving, ever hearing but never understanding, even though the fact that it's right in front of their face.
That's very, very interesting what you say there. And isn't there a particular verse in the chapter, it might be somewhere in chapter 53 of Isaiah, that literally describes how Jesus came and how he was rejected as Messiah by his people as well. And I think it's known as like the banned verse in the Torah, like it's the don't talk about it verse, because it like fits the description of Jesus that well.
Is that the one where he says today the scripture is fulfilled? Is that the one?
I'm not 100% sure, but I've come across this idea before.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
look,
probably right.
Getting back to what you were saying just earlier, you were saying if somebody died for you, what kind of standard would you be on? Well, another verse I love from the Bible is greater love hath no man than a man that laid down his life for his friends. And as you were saying, like God is your mate. And that's what God did. The Son, Jesus, incarnated on earth, died for our sins so that we may be forgiven, but not just so we can be forgiven, but so we can have communion with God, so that we can be made God's friend. And he showed us the greatest act of love that we did not deserve. And that's a free gift that any of us can access. But it takes, it takes that leap of faith. But also, I think the biggest thing for a lot of people is humility, to admit you're wrong, to admit you're a sinner, to admit you need forgiveness, to admit that you're not going to be a good enough person to get into heaven. Because I think the way the Bible describes it is you can never do enough good works to get into heaven. You can never do enough evil, or I guess enough evil either to, I guess, keep you from heaven either. I guess it's the idea that you need to get your heart right with God and that he's the one that could forgive. What's the saying? No amount of evil can send you to hell, and no amount of good can get you into heaven. It's by faith.
Yeah. By faith alone, you are justified. And look, this is the thing. Find me the God that of another religion that killed himself for his followers. You won't find it. You won't find it. So automatically that separates Christianity from the other religions. Makes it very special.
And as well as that, not just the idea of this physical death, but I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but isn't part of the idea that when he died on the cross for our sins, he took upon the wrath of God for us, because God, had to unleash his wrath. And so he took on that. He took on the pain of all of our sins, which is why he's there praying beforehand, saying, if there be any other way. But there wasn't. There was only that way.
Yeah, I mean, even when he's on the cross, he says, God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you looking away from me? It's because he had all the sins of me and you and everyone on his shoulders. And God couldn't look at him because he looked absolutely hideous.
And he came to earth to do that for us, knowing the exact suffering that he was going to go through, and the humiliation and the mockery that he was going to be put through. His own people didn't accept him. There's a lot of depth to the story of Jesus. And I guess, if you really wanted to get into it, you could speak about it for hours. But I think we've actually found a positive note, and it might actually be a good one to end on. Did you have any other thoughts just that you wanted to get out there, just while we're here finishing up, on anything we've spoken about?
No, none that I can speak of. It's just to walk in truth. Try to be the best person every day. Try to better yourself and improve yourself. That's the best advice I can give you. Don't rest on your laurels. You need to always remember to keep improving yourself and be courageous. Don't just focus on yourself. Once you work on yourself, you need to also spread that to your immediate family and respectfully, and of course your community. Otherwise, what's the point? It's just like that verse I mentioned before. Faith is great, but faith without works is dead. You have to demonstrate that, and I think that's one of the problems with our churches nowadays. But I think what we can do is we can show some courage and show the courage of our convictions, really.
And it's hard. I guess it's hard to really keep our convictions as well. I mean, we're ever living in a world that's moving away from, some of the more traditional views that we might hold as Christians. And, it will actually take courage to hold on to that. But Joel, look, thank you very much. What is next for you, and where can the people find you?
You can follow me on Facebook. That's the best way to do it. Send me a friend request. You can also follow me on YouTube. I'm way less active on there, but I do upload interviews every now and then on there. But Facebook, I have rolling 24-hour CNN-like coverage, but it's just 100 times more reliable than CNN.
I'm really enjoying your coverage. It's been absolutely great. This has been an absolute pleasure. I want to thank you very much for coming on. I want to thank you for your time. For all the listeners, make sure you go check out Joel. Make sure you subscribe for future episodes. If you've got any questions, if you've got anything that you'd like addressed, leave it in the comments. Share this with anybody else that you think could benefit from this conversation, because I think it's going to be a conversation that helps us to empower ourselves. It helps us to empower others. And it's how we're going to move the world forward. And, we're living in a COVID world. There's not too much we can do. So conversation is one of the most important things. That's why I'm so happy and grateful and blessed to have been able to sit here and have this conversation with you, Joel. So thank you. And I think, that's a wrap.
Thanks, Zach. Cheers.